Welcome back to another episode of Cultivating Change, everyone. I'm your host, Alex Corey. Thank you for sharing a piece of your day with me. Today's guest is a powerful woman. I met Rachael Gray up at a permaculture farm north of Asheville in Barnardsville, North Carolina, at a live music event. And there's not many people that you run into in daily conversation, openly chatting about hormones and nutrition, myself included. Obviously, I'm one of those metabolic nerds, but I quickly latched onto her and we started having some very interesting conversation. And she has a very powerful story of integrating the feminine experience in her own life and how she now helps, guides, and mentors others through that process. We get into a whole range of amazing subjects: nutrition, metabolic flexibility, nutrition or herbal stacking, energetic work, all of the things you'd expect from a fully embodied and amazing human. I know you'll enjoy this podcast with Rachael Gray. So the last time we chatted, the first time I met you, was at Hawk and Hawthorne. I always screwed that up. And the way I know people are passionate about health is the same way most people know I'm passionate about health. And I think I remember you going into a deep, or at least lengthy, conversation about hormones. And I gave you a side look and I was like, the only people I know who talk about hormones in regular life are health coaches. And then that spurred a nice conversation. So, uh, how did you get into? Most people have a problem they had to solve in their own lives, and that's how they get into health coaching. How did you stumble upon health coaching?
Definitely. First of all, I don't really resonate with the word coach so
Sure.
much. It's starting to kind of get a weird, like, bad rap where there's coaches coaching coaches to coach better.
Yes. Yep.
And I'm like, I just want to like separate myself from that.
Sure.
I like to think of myself more as a mentor or as a
Mhm.
companion along the path where it's like we're figuring out all of this together, and I
Yes.
just happen to know like this little very specific niche of information that
Guide
could
is
help you.
good. Yeah. Guide
Yeah.
is, or you've had your own trial and error or own experiences that, right, you just present what you've learned and it might help others along their journey if you are one step ahead. It's a lot of self experimentation and guiding. Coach is just the professional word. And I agree. It gets interesting for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, mentor, guide, holistic
Mm-hmm.
mentor. I like all of these words.
Gotcha.
Um, so the actual question was, how did I get started?
Well, yeah. What
I
did you have to solve for yourself, or how did
Yeah.
you stumble upon that?
So ever since I became a woman at the ripe old age of 13, I have had debilitating, extremely painful menstrual cramps.
Mm.
So to the point where every cycle I was and I have a pain spectrum, right? So a five or below is I can be like up and out of bed. I can be chatting with someone. I can run around and do errands. I can go to work. I can go to school, whatever. And it's like, yeah, I'm uncomfortable, but I can still go do a thing. Like I can still continue my regular life if I want to, which I don't believe that all women should have to if they don't want to. But if you needed to, you could. And then five and above is like increasingly terrible, right? Where a 10 is like, take me to the hospital. I need heavy painkillers. Like I would like to just be passed out right now. And ever since I was a young woman, I had, 7, 8, 9, 10 level cramps to the point where there was one time where I had to go to the hospital. And I found out later that it was because I had ruptured an ovarian
Mm.
cyst, which anybody with PCOS and I don't have PCOS, but you can still not have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and still rupture ovarian cysts, which people who have given birth and compare rupturing an ovarian cyst they're like the same level. They're
Oh, wow.
extremely painful, like, and very, very sudden and sharp. And if you've never experienced it before, it's like panic inducing. And I'm 15 laying on the floor of my mother's bathroom being like screaming in pain. So nice easy introduction to my
Yeah.
world, right?
Now you're good.
Let's just get really fucking personal really quick. I'm sorry, can I swear?
You're fine. Go for it.
Okay. um So I endured this throughout my teenage years with like no real hope, going to doctors and being like, what is going on with me? And just being given the kind of the brush off. And it's like, oh, you're a woman. What do you expect? You bleed every month. What do you expect? And it's
Hmm.
like, but this can't be right. So what I found out is that while extreme cramps like that are statistically common,
Hmm.
they're not normal. They're not an indication of health, of true, real, overarching health. There's so much that you can do as a woman to change lifestyle, change your energy, change the inputs and the outputs, listen to your body. I would love to talk about biofeedback and how
Yeah.
passionate I am about that.
Yes,
But
please.
so through this journey of realizing, and I self-diagnosed with a gluten allergy
Hmm.
before it was cool, which,
Hmm.
as we know, is like a strong source of inflammation,
Sure.
regardless of where you are on the
Yeah.
spectrum. If you're like hard celiac versus just like mildly intolerant,
Right.
it is inflammatory for everyone, I believe. It's
I'm
just the
with you on that.
level of
Yeah.
inflammation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's whether or
yeah.
not you have enough other compounding factors to notice it, or if you're running clean enough where it doesn't present a serious obstacle in your day.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I figured out around 20 that I had a gluten intolerance, a pretty strong allergy, and I basically grew up sick because of this undiagnosed allergy, because my inflammation was so high and my digestion was just trash because
Hmm.
of it. Just and if your intestines are trash, then you're malnourished and you really
Right.
can't absorb the the nourishment from the food you're eating. So when I was 19 or 20, I diagnosed that and realized that I had to be like fully responsible for my health, because no one else was going to ever know really what it was like to live in my body.
Right.
Just like anybody else. Like no one can ever know your body as well
Yep.
as you do, right? And so to think that a doctor who, sees however many hundreds of patients a week, thousands of patients a month, was going to be able to do anything for me except, here is the textbook, range of things that I understand. And it's no like, I went through several years where I had this just rage against traditional medicine,
Hmm.
traditional Western medicine, and just had this like, because when I went in to talk about my cramps and my digestion issues, they gave me an antidepressant.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I came in feeling emotional about
Uh,
the fact that my health was really messed up, and feeling desperate, and like, this is my last shot. If you can't help me, I don't know who can.
yeah.
So anyway, so I figured out that I could be responsible for my own health and that I could make change in my own life without necessarily needing a doctor's okay, which is funny because we still have that little like legal that legal side note, right? That's like, check with your doctor if you want
Yeah.
to eat anything but enriched cereal in the
Yep.
morning. And it's like, great, thanks.
Can't diagnose, prescribe. Yeah, it's the boundary of this is why a lot of people aren't choosing to get certified, which does give you a gives you that coach title, but the framework and the touchiness of language to not tread into nutritionist or medical framework is so annoying when you're just trying
Mhm.
to present information. It's yeah, there's so many disclaimers everywhere where it's a lot of people are foregoing that path and just talking about their experience and what has worked for them because that is the guide in essence and that's what people resonate with anyway, and then you can reference studies and sources, but yeah, the playing within the medical framework and not agreeing with all of the concepts and restrictions and procedures and fundamental assumptions or any of those is tricky. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So going through this like newfound empowerment, I really got hard into researching all things alternative and natural health.
Mhm.
Like, if there is a like anything, I have gone into it. From hair loss, I spent a lot of time in weight loss and
Mm.
metabolic training and metabolic conditioning. I call it metabolic rehabilitation,
Yeah.
especially for women. And like cancer, chronic disease, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, all of
Mm-hmm.
these like chronic lifestyle conditions that over time I realized they all had this underlying, the same thing, right? This
Right.
underlying condition of high inflammation, right?
Yes.
And so as I was in my training, and by profession I'm a copywriter, I'm a digital marketing
Mm.
consultant, but anytime I was working with a doctor in order to put their books, courses, podcasts to do the marketing for them, I had to basically become a liaison
Mm.
between the
Right.
doctor and the person who was listening, right, to be able to translate their jargon and expertise into something that people could actually understand and understand like the benefits of. So, marketer is a loose term, but I consider myself a researcher, someone who's
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to like go in and I will read the studies. I will understand the
Yeah.
doctor. I'll do all these things to get myself up to the point where I can explain it well and then explain it well.
Right.
So, I was a copywriter in the natural health industry for 12 years
Wow.
in training. With Dr. Jade Tita, Dr. Johnny Bowden, just a slew of people that I learned from. And as I was, learning, of course, I was trying all of the things on myself, right? As we
Mm-hmm.
do. And I was like,
As we
oh,
do.
okay. So with this underlying understanding of inflammation being this just huge, massive issue, even if you eat clean, even if
Mm-hmm.
you
Right.
do X, Y, and Z, like it's still, we live in such a in our modern civilization, it's just like freaking everywhere, and you
Yeah.
really
It's a
can't
sea
get
of
enough.
toxicity. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then combine that with this concept of natural endocrinology
Mm-hmm.
with balancing hormones, which I actually don't even like the term balancing anymore,
Yeah.
because if as a woman specifically, if you try to put your estrogen at the levels of your progesterone, at the levels of your, you
Right.
don't want to do that. It's a symphony, right? It's a beautiful dance of all of the
Mm-hmm.
things. You want them at the right levels at the right time to be dancing together, rather
Right.
than just like straight across the board, which is like a mild is a nuance, but I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important.
It is important. And I get there's so many other things to poke at in language, but whenever I see influencers or just that concept of balanced floating around in regard to nutrition
Mm-hmm.
online, I almost get a little bit triggered where I'm like I yeah, but I try not to say anything because if people are moving in the right direction from
Mm-hmm.
like a traditional standard American diet, and balance is what will get them eating a little better, go for it. But at the
Yeah.
other end with optimization, you're like, I don't like that word. Yeah, because it
Yeah.
implies everything in moderation, where you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
no, there's some things you should just not encounter at all. Like, there's plenty of toxic stuff everywhere where you don't need to necessarily play with the some of like gluten is a touchy subject because bread is delicious and people get it. This is the usually the entry point for a lot of people because it's so prevalent, because bread is such a comfort food. And it's weird coming from a primal health perspective, which I'm trained in. People are like, this has been around for a while. Why is it just now an issue? And you're like, well, two things. A, it's a survival food. But in the 50s, we changed the wheat to dwarf wheat. So increased yields, more resistance to everything. But that actually changed the structure of the gluten molecule, which isn't actually one thing. It's a series of proteins. And I think it's the ratio of gliadin, which is the highly inflammatory protein, got jacked up in this new dwarf wheat post 1950s. So our wheat physically changed, which is why if people go over to Europe, they don't have the same reaction to Italian or even like Italian heirloom wheat the way it's been grown forever. You don't get the same yields, but you don't get the same reaction. So a lot of the issues people run into is modern agriculture. But that's one of those nuanced, tricky subjects where most people don't want to go into that level of detail, but gluten is usually the thing. Dairy and gluten and sugar usually people are first exposed to, and then it tumbles down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then you throw in the glyphosate on top of
Right.
that, and all of the other things, and
Yeah. Again with
every
agriculture. Yeah.
yeah, everything else that white bread is made
Mhm.
with.
Right.
Right. And just how, yeah, we could get into a whole conversation about the separation of prana from nutrients, and like how
Yes.
just devoid of any life it actually is.
Yeah, which is why, and the location you're at is on a permaculture farm, and that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm very passionate about because people get very dark whenever they start to uncover all this information about corruption of the agricultural system, of food, of health, of just life force in general. But there are plenty of solutions. So you guys are working on one of them. Like permaculture is a great solution to reclaiming the food system and working with ecosystems in general. We can go into that if you want, but you touched on a bunch of different good things. You touched on metabolic reconditioning and all of those. Which direction would you like to go in with, or I guess continue your story if you weren't
Sure, yeah,
done
I'll
yet?
finish the
Yes.
story. Um, so starting to discover these twin pillars really of inflammation and hormone imbalances, hormone
Mm-hmm.
deharmonization, disharmonization. And as I was studying under these doctors and trying these things for myself, not only did I lose 40 pounds in like 4 or 5 months,
Wow.
yeah, going from eating like gluten-free Domino's pizzas in Baltimore to
Yep.
like actually taking, and actually, I lost the 40 pounds without even changing my diet. It was just from the
Wow.
metabolic conditioning exercises that I was doing with Jade Tita, and now coach my own clients through.
Yep.
But then, once you start exercising, you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't eat this
Yeah.
crap anymore. Like maybe I should take care of my body in other ways, right?
Right.
So you can look at holistic healing through any lens, which is why I love it so much.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, and I love the idea of self-guided healing where, if a client comes to me, they're like, I'm really like, I'm interested in nutrition. That's all I want to do. I want to change my diet. I want to eat better. I want to try carnivore. I want to try this. I want to try
Mm-hmm.
that. I'm like, cool. That's amazing. I'm not going to force you to do fitness work. I'm not going to force you to exercise. Like I'll always offer that to you. But
Yeah.
if you're just like not interested and you just want to do nutrition, it's like, great, let's start there. And then we can be like, okay, let's add on supplements. Let's add
Yeah.
on this, let's add on that. So as I'm doing all of these things, I realized not only did I lose weight, which is of course a great hormone balancer, as a
Right.
hormone harmonizer, because a lot of the fat cells, that's estrogen gets trapped in your fat
Mm.
cells as a woman, and well, probably as a man too, but
Yes.
um and as you start to, it becomes its own metabolic organ. Most people don't realize this.
Yeah.
That adipose tissue becomes a metabolic organ in and of itself. It throws off hormones,
Yeah.
and it has conversations with the rest of the body, which is just fascinating. It's not just like this dead weight; it's alive.
It is.
So as I started losing weight, as I started actually really practicing what I was learning, I realized that my cramps were slowly dropping. Like I had to, there was one moment, this was the probably besides the ovarian cysts, which are terrifying,
Mm.
one of the moments that was the worst moments when I realized I was like, I have to do something about this, was I was working in Baltimore, at a financial newsletter publishing company, and very like, these are Wall Street rejects. So it's not just high powered Wall Street traders, it's the rejects, the guys who like
Interesting.
are going like A type heavy, just super toxic masculine,
Yeah.
like all of the worst things that I would never be associated with anymore. Um, and so the work environment was just like very, very
Yeah.
structured, very stressful, very like show up, do the thing, you better be here until 7 p.m. every night,
Right.
this kind of place. And so naturally, I didn't feel like I had not learned yet that I could give myself permission to take time off to bleed in peace, and to just like go in and be in my, I call it moon nesting, where you're just
Mm-hmm.
like in with your body,
I like
and
that. It's a good phrase.
yeah, and doing that thing. So I had taken I had taken 600 milligrams of ibuprofen
Okay.
and 2 Excedrin migraines, which has more aspirin, 120 milligrams of caffeine, and acetaminophen on top of it. and I was drinking coffee as well.
Yeah.
And I was in the coffee because I was just trying to make it through the day, right?
Yeah.
Which a lot of women come to me and say, and they're just like, I have to survive my day. So that's why I take painkillers. And I'm like, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. So that's kind of how I started to measure whether my pain was improving, was by how many painkillers I had to take. So I've been doing all of this and was getting coffee in the coffee room and blacked out. Like completely healthy, otherwise healthy 26-year-old girl blacks out
Wow.
in an office. And I like woke up, and I wasn't out for that long, but I woke up on the floor with my partner at the time looking down at me being like, are you okay? Do you need to go to the hospital? And I wasn't at the point where I was so confident and well versed in talking about my cycle with men specifically, because all these guys in their Wall Street vests
Yeah.
are like looking down at me like, do we need to call an ambulance? And I'm like so embarrassed and humiliated. Not only that, but in deep pain and just this moment of chaos where I was like, I have to change. This sucks. Like, I can't keep doing this to myself. This isn't right. And my story is not rare. Like, many women have this same story where they've had to go through this and then learn to take ownership for their health, to realize that this concept that extreme pain like this is at all normal, like you should just have to deal with it, is complete garbage. So that's realization number 2. And then number 3 is that you can do an enormous amount about it. So like I said, as I started applying these hormone harmonizing techniques that I use, as well as fighting inflammation and having like inflammation stacks of herbs and good protein and cleaning up my diet in general, I'm at the point now where my pain is the worst my pain will get is a 5.
Oh wow. Okay. So you halved it.
Yeah, I have
That's
it.
awesome.
And that's on the absolute worst moment of my cycle, right? And most of the time, it's a 1, 2, or a 3. So, and I have to take like maybe 2, like a half a painkiller, maybe 2 throughout my whole cycle. And it's so the change now is I no longer hate being a woman.
It's a great change.
Yeah. I don't loathe having a menstrual cycle. I have actually managed to change extreme pain into ecstasy and bliss. And I find that it's one of my most creative times of the month, where I'm able to just like channel a lot of interesting ideas and just like business ideas and magic and all of these things. I'm just more open and available for it. And obviously it's become a passion of mine to help guide other women through this same transformation where, no matter what you're doing or where you're going, like it used to be that I wouldn't go on vacation if I knew I was going to be bleeding, and because it would just be ruined and I would just be, it's just not worth it. Right. But now it's like, I'm like, cool, we're jumping on a plane. Awesome. It's not even.
So your vitality towards life changed entirely.
Exactly.
It's cool. What are the easiest things that you found? So if someone comes to you and if they don't want to yet jump into I really want to get your herbal stacks and basically all the things you mentioned, just because I'm sure, and even men are in a tremendous amount of pain, usually from sports, from when they're earlier and they never actually get into like deep tissue work, or like pain is something I would guess maybe like 25% or more of the people in everywhere are in all the time. Like, just if you're an adult, you probably have some lingering chronic pain that some people deal with it every day. Like, I have very tight hips, so I have to do things for that, but your level of pain is a whole different ball game. So what did you find was like step 1, cut this out? Step 2, what were your real easy ones that, just in chatting with people, even who aren't clients, what do you usually say?
Well, for women specifically, the first thing I need to know is if they're on birth control or not.
Right.
Because if you are, your entire natural hormone system has been artificially suppressed. So if we want to start to, and a lot of women are on birth control because they're so terrified of their natural cycle, which makes total sense. But the time for empowered contraception and natural contraception and like coming back into our natural cycles and being and understanding that there's so much you can do to mitigate that pain and mood swings too is huge for women as well, especially with the rise of PMDD that I'm seeing. So I'm getting to the beginning of your question, which is the first thing, as long as they are either not on birth control or are interested in coming off, the first thing that I always look at is bioidentical hormones, which kind of sounds like the big guns in a way, but Dr. Erica Schwartz talks a lot about this. If you haven't read The Hormone Cure, I highly recommend it.
I will.
If you work with women at all. But bioidentical progesterone has been one of the fastest acting solutions that I have ever done for myself, and also worked with other women too, because a huge part of the normalizing, because when we're looking at extreme mood swings, extreme cramps, we're looking at hormones that are spiking too high or dropping too low.
Right.
And in the second half of the cycle, we're looking at specifically either estrogen dominance or progesterone deficiency, or both. They're not actually the same thing.
Right.
Estrogen dominance, I would say that like the vast majority of women in the Western world, even me still, like I still feel it. I would say the vast majority of women struggle with this because of BPAs, because of xenoestrogens, because of sugar, because of inflammation, because we're carrying too much extra weight, like whatever it is. The estrogen is not dropping down low enough in the second half of the cycle for progesterone to come up over the top like it should. And then progesterone deficiency is when it doesn't come up over the top high enough. And if you're listening to this, just pull up a chart of menstrual cycle hormones and you'll see what
I'll
I'm
put one
talking
up,
about.
during the review of this. So it sounds like the exact, I mean, obviously it's not, but for anyone, all my programs and just chatting with people, the one thing that I always harp, not with this level of endocrine hormones so much as just what insulin, what leptin, what cortisol, just mainly when insulin is elevated, because it's the same arc where you're like, if this is chronically spiking and high, like everything in your body works on ratios, triggers, ratios, signals, like you mentioned. So if one of these is chronically high and insulin is the driver of all the other ones, none of the other ones work properly. Like your body is not designed to have things pegged at 80% all the time, exactly like you were saying. So yeah, you start looking at all these bell curve arcs and you're just like, this absolute difference isn't where it's supposed to be. Like things are supposed to be, will come back down to baseline way more quickly than they do. And like you said, there's so many things that do biomimicry. So many compounds in our environment, new compounds that we've created, waste products of industry, all those things that will plug a hormone receptor. So your body thinks it's close enough where it'll plug a hormone. There's lots of things that plug estrogen. And yeah, even for men notice this too, because our testosterone and estrogen ratios are supposed to be pretty fixed. So if we have a good amount of estrogen floating around, men start noticing things change rapidly. We're not used to the swings, like we don't deal with the mood swings as frequently or as much as women do, obviously, growing up. So we're not accustomed to recognizing or even thinking about our hormones. So whenever we notice things like our general vitality for our day, or drive or ambition, or understanding, calmness, like all of those things get thrown out of whack when our endocrine system is out of whack, not probably to the extreme that you deal with. We don't deal with that pain so much. So I think women are just have to be, unfortunately, more in touch with their bodies too, because they're forced to.
Unfortunately, or is it an absolute blessing?
Well, true. There's a other side of that coin.
Because I love this conversation, because it does feel like a curse if you aren't aware of what's going on, if you don't have the information, if you don't understand that Your body is talking to you literally all the time. It is constantly telling you what it wants and needs. And extreme cramps and extreme mood swings are just that. They're extreme symptoms. But if you have, and this is what I do in my Eclipse Method program, is we go through all of these signals. So we're looking at sleep, hunger, mood, energy, cravings, what Jade Teta calls SHMEC.
Good acronym.
SHMEC,
Yep.
sleep, hunger, mood, energy, cravings. But we're also looking at libido. We're looking at creativity, productivity. What's your get up and go level, like your vitality, like you said, athletic recovery, looking at performance. Are you able to get through a workout in the way that you want to? And these biofeedback signals definitely all come back to and indicate hormone levels, but they also look at, like you said, blood sugar. What are you eating on it? What are your macros looking like? What's your stress level looking like? And is it mental? Is it external? Is it internal? What's going on? So there's so many different factors that come into it. And where was I going? Oh, the blessing of being a woman, right? So so if you don't have this body of knowledge, if you don't understand that your metabolism is talking to you literally all the time, and you can't speak to it, you don't speak the language of metabolism, you don't understand that, and you don't know how to speak back to it to get it to do what you want it to do, rather than it being in control. Yeah, it feels like a curse, because you're like groping around in your life just totally blind, and you have no idea what's going on. And so you go to the one person you think you should go to, who's your doctor, and they give you birth control, and it just eliminates everything, right? It's like, let's just suppress all of it. It's all screwed up. But I get
like you said,
frustrated with it.
It's like an antidepressant, because they're just like, it just baselines and numbs everything. So it's not addressing any of the underlying mechanisms at all. It's just flattening everything. So it's just like perma band-aid. We don't have to deal with any of the highs and lows, which isn't a true experience in my opinion. And a lot of people who are on them, that's what they go crazy for. It just makes everything gray. You don't have the black and white anymore. Gray is not a great way to live most of the time.
Yeah. So as a female-bodied human who has done the work to come into my body, recognize it as truly a divine vessel, as something that holds my spirit and soul. It's not just, my brain is not just something that I can that allows me to sit at a computer and do work, right? Like bringing the concept of divinity into the somatic body, and being able to recognize, but also truly feel the beauty of my cycle, of how I move through. Because I've gotten to the point where, I live with six men, intentional community. Me and my sister Genevieve are the only women here right now, which is fine. But the point is, I look at them and they're just going all the time, and they don't feel like they can stop, because there's no natural break for you guys. There's no built-in rest. There's no sense of, and because we live in an over-prioritized masculine paradigm, women have been born and raised in this paradigm where women who are absolutely cellularly, hormonally, inherently different than the male body, we're raised in this paradigm, and we think that we have to keep going all the time. And I've gotten to the point now where, because I've been, a freelancer for so long, I've owned my time for so long, I can take the whole week of my cycle off and just be in my body and rest. And then I find that when I do, it's like sharpening the axe, right? Or pulling the rubber band back before you fire. I have so much freaking energy. And then I get to design my lifestyle and my energy and my creativity and my production around my hormones, which is so freaking liberating.
Right. I imagine. I'm kind of jealous. Because I don't have that forced rest. And the creativity must be insane, where you're just building up energy that entire time. I'm also jealous of the iron purge, because that's a massive issue for guys. There's iron toxicity in your blood, and you have to give blood, obviously, but we don't have a built-in iron purge, and that's becoming more of a thing in metabolic circles. Just make sure you cycle your blood.
Definitely, which a man might never ever think about.
Right.
without a coach, right?
Well, it's getting there. I just listened to too many channels, and that's one thing that people are harping on, where they're just like, especially on the carnivore side, like you're eating a
Hmm.
ton of iron, so make sure you're cycling it out so your body does not build up iron toxicity, because that is a real thing. Yeah.
Interesting. How often do you suggest that men donate blood?
Depends how afraid of needles you are. I am not great with needles, but I mean, once a month, like,
Wow.
yeah, well, that's what's
Wow.
suggested on it's still getting to the everyone talking about it level, but there's a couple of big doctors and big nutritionists and channels being like, mostly because people are having such good success with higher protein diets and just regulating weight and energy levels and mood and all that, where they're like, you're probably getting a good amount of red meat, so if you're getting way more iron than you were before, your body doesn't have a great way to deal with that. Like, it doesn't get metabolized in anything else. So they say, ideally once a month. That's a lot for me even. So I would do at least once a quarter. And there's, blood drives everywhere. So it's not difficult. It just takes time. It's free, and it's also needed. So it's not a bad thing to do at all.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing that I really love for men that is becoming more of a restful cleansing refreshing experience is the rise of sweat lodges,
Yes.
especially in Asheville and more woke quote unquote areas where the native people have started offering
Mm-hmm.
have been opening up the doors of their sweat lodges to everyone to
Yes.
come in and cleanse and be together. The other thing that men can do is start paying attention to the moon. If you don't have a female partner, or if
Right.
you do have a female partner and she's not aligned to the moon cycles, just start paying attention and noticing like when your energy naturally dips with the new moon and start rising with the full moon, and then you'll kind of have this experience of what it feels like to be in a female body, is
Yeah. Right.
which I think everybody could do with more rest. So
I agree. And
yeah.
I've tried to do better with that myself, because I am exactly like you said before, just go, 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 go. Like, I always could be doing something, especially working for yourself. You don't have a
Mm-hmm.
forced off where you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not working anymore. Calm down. Like, that disappears. So Tai Chi and Qigong has helped, where it's a moving meditation where still trigger, it gets that I should be doing something itch in there. So it's not stillness meditation, which I also do, but that is much harder for someone whose brain won't shut up. Moving meditations, you're still moving some blood, you're still getting all those nice neurotransmitters going, but it requires the focus and the slowness that makes you calm down, and then it's an ease into restfulness. You don't feel um, it's not a stimulant. You don't feel like you have to go do a workout after. It's more likely to slip into a restful or a real meditative state. So that's helped me a lot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
And as you were talking about before, living with some serious female partners for like 5 years at a time, that's a really good way to begin to understand the amount of everything that is the feminine experience. Where before I would always get angry whenever, not angry, very confused and irritated whenever there would be, raised voices, or I just wouldn't understand what had changed. And then I started asking, um, you can tell me, like, what's going on? Is it this time of the month? And they'd be like, oh yeah, I started a week ago. And I was like, okay, so I need to start planning this. Where, yeah, if something just comes out of nowhere at you, like you said, mood swings, or it's most of the time, if you're a understanding and caring guy, it's probably not you. Like, it's we have no real understanding of what our partners are going through, unless they're expressive, unless it happens at the same time every month, and then we start to pick it up. But yeah, just the understanding that they might be in pain. Like, there's so many variables that we don't have to deal with, so we don't have that empathetic response. We have the could you tell me, but oftentimes women don't really want to tell you, because some think it's embarrassing still. So yeah, just being more open to understanding what your partner is going through, if you have a female partner, is huge, and it will ripple through life in other ways, as I discovered.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a strong bridge for the healing of the rift between the
Mm,
divine masculine and the divine feminine as we're moving,
right,
as the divine feminine on the planet is rising and women are becoming, taking ownership for themselves, becoming
right,
more empowered in their voices, and doing this work to really tune in somatically and understand their metabolism and their hormone cycles. Like, if you don't understand it as a woman, how can you expect your male partner to understand it?
right.
And I totally agree. And um it's really frustrating and sad, and also like just understandable in some ways that that we've become so programmed to just internalize,
Yeah.
like, and to feel that real fear of like, I'm not in control of myself right now.
Mm,
I'm not who I know myself to be. Something is going on that I don't have control over. And like, especially for female bodied humans,
yeah.
being like, I am out of control of my body and I'm taking it out on someone I love on top of it. It's just this like chaos spiral of emotions. And then we judge ourselves and shame
Right.
ourselves. And then we throw in another layer of emotion, right? And it's just, it can be really devastating. It can be devastating. And yeah, so understanding and compassion and knowing that there's so much you can do about it, so we can get back into the the inflammatory stack and like what my
Yes.
top recommendations are for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, just like,
What would you say, well, lifestyle or, yeah, I really want to hear your herb stack because that's fascinating because I'm starting to grow those this spring. We're rebuilding the greenhouse up in Alexander Marshall area, not too far away from you guys. And we'll be doing a lot of detox specific herbs. It kind of had a year off because permaculture takes more than one person. So we finally have man hours to work with. So what are your top nutrition or um, anything that people can do in their lifestyle and ingest that will help the inflammation and general hormone levels?
totally. And they're two sides of the same coin, right? Like,
Right.
inflammation affects hormone
Yes.
balance affects inflammation. So that's really important to understand. Yeah, I'm writing down a list here so I
Mm-hmm.
remember all of them.
Yeah, I've been
The
taking notes.
the most, oh my god, there's so much. This is like what my
Yeah.
life is dedicated to, so I might not even cover everything that I'm thinking about here. Probably the most impactful as far as hormone balance, the most impactful that I notice the biggest effect with is fish oil.
Yeah.
um
So
Fish
omegas.
oils, yeah, omegas specifically. I prefer a good high quality krill oil,
Okay.
especially with astaxanthin.
Yep.
And if you can find one that's combined with evening primrose, and this is just for
Ooh.
women, um, evening primrose combined with super high quality DHAs and EPAs is like, hands down, I will not go without it.
What's the primrose do?
I would have to jump back into it, and refresh on the research, but it's a hormone balancer
Okay.
for women specifically. Yeah.
Is that thrown in there because with the omegas specifically, or just because it is a hormone balancer? As in, are you throwing it in there just because it's a good combo, or do they work synergistically off of each other?
They do work
Okay,
synergistically,
cool.
yes. And I would have to kind of
That's
jump
fine.
back in the research, but
I'll dig after this. That's so
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah.
Okay, so that's
So
a very specific one. I like that.
so Metabolic Living is the company that I used to work for, and they make some of, they're probably the highest quality supplements that you've never heard of, because they don't actually sell they sell through direct response. They don't sell through
Gotcha.
like generalized advertising or on
Right.
Amazon or anything like that. But they have a product called Metabolic Super Omegas,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually kind of in the form of like Barlean's.
Yeah.
It's like you take it in a tablespoon,
Yep.
and you can just take a shot of it basically. But it's super high quality krill, sardine, anchovy, all wild caught. And then it has the evening primrose oil in it
Nice.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Primal calls that SMASH hits. That's their
there you
acronym.
go.
Sardines, mackerels, anchovies, krills at the end. I don't remember the other H, but yeah, all the tiny little fish that usually don't have a ton of bioaccumulated
Yeah.
anything in them. So they're
Herring? Is
herring.
herring one of
Thank
them?
you.
Yeah,
Yep, that's
yeah,
it. Yeah, I always forget that one.
yeah.
Mostly because it's just not easy to find in a small can. Usually you can do
Hmm.
sardines, anchovies, mackerel easily enough, but same
Yeah.
concept. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so omegas are key. And then
Hmm.
what else you got?
Yes, yeah. So turmeric, obviously,
Yeah.
number one main anti-inflammatory pain mitigator.
Mhm.
I like for pretty much everything. I like Gaia herbs the best.
Yeah. And they're
They're
local.
and they're local. Yeah, we can go on a field trip and go see
Yeah.
their factory. Their turmeric supreme, I believe, is what I use, and
Okay.
it's 500 megs per cap. I do 2 of those a day
Wow. Yeah.
before bed.
That's a
Hmm.
lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll be growing that in the spring. Turmeric is
amazing.
hard just because it takes so long and it takes so much heat. Both
Hmm.
ginger and turmeric are tropical rhizomes, so you
Hmm.
just need a lot of heat. So even in Western North Carolina, we have cold snaps into April. So greenhouse is
Hmm.
required and temperature control because that soil temperature, so like tomatoes, really don't like going below 55. So we'll be doing that next year.
Yeah, definitely.
That's
I
awesome.
I just like to find people who are already doing it, but good
Yeah,
on you for
exactly.
growing the
Yeah.
hard stuff, you know. So you actually just touched on one that a lot of like generalized websites will tell women to try is ginger, and then also Vitex berry or what's the less cool name for it? Oh my god, I'm blanking. Oh, chaste tree berry,
Okay.
Vitex. Um, so the anti-inflammatory stack, I will hand out to anyone. Just definitely make that your baseline stack, and it can really only do good things for you. Ginger and Vitex, I want to, and bioidentical progesterone, absolutely. I really encourage people to have someone educated working with you, your own guide
Mm,
or mentor, whether it's me or someone else, because the biofeedback from ginger, Vitex, and bioidentical progesterone can get really, really finicky, really quick.
interesting.
And if you overdose or you underdose, if you underdose, you're not getting the results you want. If you overdose, you can actually make things worse. So like, and as we know with hormones, like just the the tiniest little
Yeah.
drop can make a difference, right? Because hormones are so like finely tuned.
And they
Um,
cascades. That's the other
exactly.
thing. Yeah, just it's not just one thing that it affects. It sends a cascade of ripples down. So yeah, the human body is infinitely complex. And whenever this is the sort of arrogance. I mean, they get a lot right, but the arrogance of conventional Western medicine is let's change this one thing. And you're like, nothing is isolated in the human body. So yeah, you're going to do a cascade of something. And right, you don't want to be, well, people self medicate with medicinal herbs all the time.
Yeah.
Like elder is very toxic in certain parts of the plant. So that's
Mhm.
why it should be treated like medicine where there are potential side effects. There are, Chinese had this, right? You don't just throw these things at people all the time. And there's ones that are pretty safe, like turmeric and
Mhm.
like berries are good and all those. But there's some ones that you have to be careful with, yeah, because they will send massive signals through your body that you might not want.
Yeah, yeah. And not even knowing, for example, like I just learned that you shouldn't eat elderberries.
No, right,
You
correct.
don't actually eat them.
Right,
We were
right.
walking by them and my partner was like, "You know that you don't actually eat these, right?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "No."
Yeah, they're fairly poisonous. That's the
Yeah.
hormetic response. What people go for with the syrup. That is a small dose of poison that triggers your anti-inflammatory pathways. Whatever medicine measures the effect of glutathione if it hits. People know the NRF2 pathway from broccoli sprouts. Rhonda Patrick popularized that one. So that's got a lot of research behind it, but we only know like a couple of those pathways. There's hundreds of those pathways that we haven't
Thousands.
yet,
Yeah.
right? Probably an
Yeah.
infinite amount. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these just generate a good hormetic effect. So your body kicks into gear and it's your body doing the healing, not necessarily the compound itself, although turmeric is pretty powerful for doing a lot of work itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Along the same lines of the anti-inflammatories, oregano and
Mhm.
olive leaf extract.
Yes.
So with oregano, I I would only add that on top of turmeric if we're talking about extreme inflammatory situations.
Yeah.
And you only really want to take oregano for like 4 to 6 weeks and then take 4 to 6 weeks off
It's
because it's
potent.
such a powerful,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah, it's
concentrated. If you get the oil, it
mhm,
is
mhm.
not to be messed with. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas olive leaf, on the other hand, I take every day all the
Yeah.
time. And that one is a highly adaptive extract that I have done a lot of research on, and you can take that all the time.
Do you know if that's because of the oleocanthal or are there other additional compounds in the leaf extract that are helpful?
It's
Oleocanthal is the main
so
compound in
yeah.
the oil, but I don't know if the
Mhm.
leaf extract is different.
Mm, yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on the brand. Like
Yeah,
some
true.
brands will pull out certain
Yeah.
compounds and emphasize others. I like a wide spectrum
Yeah.
just to like make it kind of like hemp
Yes.
extract, right? You
Right.
just want the wide. Yeah.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, so and then good old vitamin C,
Yeah.
you know. I always make sure that I get Dr. Mercola has a really good vitamin C that I like,
Mhm.
the liposomal, which
Yep.
allows it to be absorbed into fat because it's fat soluble. So rather than just any water soluble vitamin C just gets flushed out, right? You can,
Right.
and that's why when you're sick, you can take thousands of milligrams and have it be fine. But if you're doing liposomal, you really don't want to. I wouldn't do more than 6,000 milligrams, but even that's not necessary.
Right.
For most people, taking 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of liposomal vitamin C is going to be great.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
chunk. Yeah, anything
yeah.
over. Well, I have a good friend who whenever she feels something out of whack, she will take a gram, 1,000 milligrams,
Mm-hmm.
like every hour. She won't do that
Yeah.
every day, but that's definitely like a self-medicated dose of vitamin C. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's hard to over, it's like vitamin D, hard to overdo it, but you can for sure. You know, your body doesn't tolerate a
Uh-huh.
ton.
Vitamin D is another one of those tricky ones that
Mhm.
I said I would prefer people be working with someone educated
Yeah,
with vitamin D because with COVID everyone was like, oh, the people who have a vitamin D deficiency are getting more and more and more sick, and so people were dosing like
right,
10,000, 15,000 milli
right.
or
That's
IU's
a
rather
scary
of
scale.
vitamin D, and I was
Yeah.
like, don't do it. So
Yeah.
for me, I had an interesting and then the other thing that I really like about and I think is really important to stress to listeners is when you're changing anything, change one thing at a time.
Right. Right.
And I'm sure you've told your people this before where it's like be a detective, be a
Yep.
scientist, like change one thing at a time. I know you want to get to the result as quickly as possible. And generally speaking, again with the anti-inflammatory stack with the fish oil, the EPO, the turmeric, and the vitamin C, I'm like, let's just go for it. Like we
Yeah.
can we can start that baseline to really start bringing people into those lower inflammatory levels.
Mhm.
But with things like Vitex, progesterone, vitamin D, um, ginger, like do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Because my experience with vitamin D is that even just dosing a little bit actually served the opposite purpose. Where in women, I think I'm not sure if it's both men and women, but in women, vitamin D can actually pull calcium out of your bones and out of
Yeah.
your muscles if you take too much of
Yeah,
it.
it's a cofactor.
And
So you need
mhm,
calcium for it to work on a lot of its pathways. Yeah.
exactly. So if you're not taking it with calcium,
Right.
which is a whole other topic,
Yes.
but um, it actually made my cramps worse
Oh,
because
geez.
it pulled all the calcium out of my muscles and caused them to be
Yeah.
contracting. And I was
Spasm.
like, no,
Yeah.
yeah. So be careful, like you said, when you're self-dosing, when you're self-medicating, it's so much better to be working with someone, a naturopath or a coach or someone who
Or
knows
just
what
go
they're
with
talking
food.
about.
That's why it's always
Yeah.
nutrition first because it's hard to usually whole foods are formulated such that it's really hard for any one of those to get out of balance unless you do it consistently like iron like we were talking about. But yeah, they have other compounds in the foods that will regulate the food itself. So it's really hard to run into the issues of medicinal doses of any of these with just a very good diet.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah. And then there's a couple of teas that I really like. I'll do a stack of raspberry leaf, peppermint, and and we can talk about liver too with estrogen. Dandelion root extract, or sorry, dandelion root tea. And then I combine all of those three into like a big mason jar and just sip on that in the second half of my cycle.
What does that really taste like? Raspberry, peppermint, dandelion. Interesting.
Well, raspberry leaf just kind of tastes like black tea. It doesn't really have. It's just kind of tanniny and roasty, and then dandelion is very roasty, right? It's used as a coffee alternative in a lot of ways, in a lot of places. And then peppermint, so it's kind of got this like peppermint mocha coffee kind of, but like it's tea, so it's watery.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's one of my faves. And actually, speaking of the liver and estrogen, right? When we're talking about estrogen dominance, liver, helping our liver to cleanse excess estrogen, especially in the second half of the cycle, and especially in the third week of the menstrual cycle. So doing things like milk thistle extract, and again dandelion, and there's a couple other ones. There's a good liver cleanse that I like called Liver One. I forget the company who makes it, but
okay, we can put all those in the show notes.
That has made an enormous difference, especially if alcohol is one of your current friends,
right?
Because alcohol is highly estrogenic. So
not enough. Well, I should say more attention is being placed on the liver, mainly because people are eating so much liver now, where sort of it's being understood for its magical detox pathways by less pharmaceutically inclined people. Like obviously everyone, if you're in medicine, you study the liver and its detox pathways, but more of the alternative and holistic community is focusing on a lot of the specific and treating your liver better just because of it is your detox pathway. Like that's what it does. So thankfully more attention is being paid on how to help your own detox pathways, which is lovely. Sounds like we are being bombarded everywhere by toxicity. So it's now not really an option to feel normal. Like you have to focus on detox. If even endogenously, if, first stop poisoning yourself, then assist your body in its own cleanup processes. The most low-hanging fruit and effective thing that all of my clients land on, whether or not I want them to, it's always good, is intermittent fasting. Just because most people, it was never really explained to us that your body has powerful detox pathways, but you have to not be eating. As in, it just goes into cleanup mode, and that's where fasting comes into popularity, as it has in the last 10 years. So I'm actually really happy that time-restricted feeding or intermittent fasting, or basically just not eating, the opposite of grazing, the opposite of small meals all the time, which is the more time you're not eating, the more time your body has to clean itself up. And it is really good at doing that if you get out of its way for the most part.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely something. If someone came to me with weight loss desires and they wanted to do that, that's one of the first questions I'm going to ask is, when do you start eating? When do you stop eating? Because for some people, actually widening the eating window can be better, because it helps the metabolism. Right. We want a flexible metabolism, right? We don't want a fast metabolism.
Right.
And for most people, they're in a state, various degrees of metabolic inflexibility, where it's like, I've been eating the exact same way for the past 10, 20, 30 years, whatever, and my metabolism knows exactly what is going on every single day, and it doesn't have to get up off the couch, it doesn't have to pay attention, it's just like easy, right? So if you have been intermittent fasting for a long time, which is funny because it's the day after Thanksgiving, right? If you have been intermittent fasting for a while, taking 2 weeks to shake it up, right?
That's true.
And to keep the metabolism on its toes and be like, oh, I do have to pay attention. Okay, here we go. right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
So,
So anything you've been doing for a long time, principle of specificity, your body gets
mhm,
good at and extremely efficient at exactly what you've been asking it to do.
yeah,
Yeah, changing it up often is always a good thing because yeah, flexibility, metabolic flexibility is the goal. Whatever you actively do or consume, your body should be able to cope with. It
mhm,
has an infinite capacity, but you need to stress test it once in a while and remind it of its blueprint. Yeah.
yeah. Which is why I really love the idea of seasonal, changing your
Yeah.
eating style according to the seasons.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about, carnivore and keto, doing those practices for, keto, you don't really want to be on for more than 6 weeks ish is my understanding, really. Um, but giving your body time, giving your metabolism time to shift gears, come back into like awareness of itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what these really relaxing, cleansing, detoxing protocols can do for us. So carnivore is a great detoxer, which
Yeah. It's a
you
reset
wouldn't.
where
Yeah.
I know it's so weird. Well, I mean, it's the simplest thing you can do. So it's just micronutrients, macronutrients, and well, most people have wildly fluctuating blood sugar. So it's the
Yeah,
quickest
let's talk
way.
about blood sugar.
Yeah, quickest way to stabilize and fast line that. But that's a tricky one because I never tell someone to do it the day. Like I wouldn't do it in one day. I would tiptoe down. Like if someone's doing high carb, I would reduce it and reduce it and reduce it so that you can build up mitochondria and process fat a little better. Because
Mhm.
that's what all of the documentaries and all the people who have really bad experiences going from standard American diet and then they just go keto, you're like, that's going to hurt a lot because
Oh
your
yeah.
body thinks
Oh yeah.
you're starving. Whereas if you, my protocols are Primal has a good way of doing this where you tiptoe down your carbohydrate ladder and you'll eventually get to keto and then get more efficient at it. And then you can start climbing back up if you want for performance goals. But yeah, people have mood swings, like everything can be tied to blood sugar imbalance. And that's insulin resistance and leptin resistance are at the forefront of a lot of the metabolic studies right now, which is nice. We don't fully know how all of the systems play together, but insulin resistance is good for nothing, like tied to all chronic inflammatory diseases, like you said earlier, all that list, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, all have a root at uh, blood sugar floating around, getting oxidized, damages everything. I mean, that's what type 2 diabetes is.
Yeah.
My father died from that. Just didn't take control of it and just let it run rampant and you're
Mhm.
just oxidizes everything. You just start losing functionality. It's not great. And that's the polar extreme end of that,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah. I'm sorry for
Oh,
that.
that's okay. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't actually know my father, but he had that issue. So it was always a concern when I was growing up. My mom would
Mhm.
always make sure that I metabolize sugar incredibly well, thankfully. But um, and even people, the tricky part is with blood sugar, even people who think they metabolize it well, just because you don't gain weight doesn't mean it's not doing damage. It'll age you. That's what oxidation is. It's rusting. So like I age quickly, like I have lots of silver hair, and that might be because I grew up on a basically all sugar diet. And just because you're not gaining weight doesn't mean it's not running, doing circles in your body, as in I'm just very active. But so is my mother. That's a saving grace being active, but inflammation always exists. So it's always important to figure out what is the way to get a cool burn, I like to say, going, as in
Yeah.
you don't want to be, like you said, you don't want a fast metabolism. You want a efficient metabolism. If you're doing like a sports car analogy, you would like to be coasting most of the time and not running at like 100 miles per hour, which is what people think of metabolism as. So yeah,
Hmm.
you want to be at a really nice coast with your
Hmm.
metabolism if you don't need anything extra.
Hmm. Yeah,
What
and
do
then
you,
to add on to that analogy, looking at the exhaust, right?
right?
So are you burning dirty? Are you burning
Yep.
a lot of sugar and like having a lot of nasty toxic exhaust that's just breaking down breaking down the cellular walls, getting into the mitochondria and exploding things in there, like, or are you burning clean where you're mostly running with protein and high quality fat? And then of course the micro and macros that we get from fresh organic vegetables and fruit.
Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, and that was the high school biology. They always glossed over that, or at least my my high school biology did. So one time most people ever get exposed to metabolism and mitochondria is that one day in high school biology, where there's like, this is how glucose metabolism works. And then they follow it up because you're like, that doesn't look efficient. And they're like, that's just how it is. Right. It's not efficient. It just creates a ton of waste. You don't get a lot of ATP from it compared to how much work you had to put in. So yeah, if you can slowly train yourself to make sure you're able to process fat well, yeah, you don't have to do it all the time, but make sure you can, because most people don't, because we have untrained it, because we just eat all day. Your body has zero reason to dip into stored fat stores if you constantly give it food. Like that's the beauty of fasting in general, is make sure your body remembers how to use that. You don't have to use it all the time, which would be keto, but make sure you retain that skill. It's a good tool.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, isn't that funny that eating more dietary fat actually unlocks fat cells, because it trains your metabolism to look at fat as your primary form of energy. And then it's like, okay, the more fat that I eat, and then you go into the fasting, right? And it's like, aha, my body knows that I would like to be burning fat for energy. And then
it's a great pair.
Those fat cells.
And it's the tricky part is people are like, I can eat all the fat I want. And I was like,
calories still matter.
Right. It's like you can still overeat. It's just really hard to. If you're doing like a high amount of whole food, so protein is always packaged with fat for the most part. If you're doing whole foods, protein and fat, you're going to be hard pressed to overeat, because you're just going to be so obnoxiously full. And this is where the carnivore community shines. They're just like, I eat like once a day, maybe twice. Like, you don't end up eating that many calories because it is so satiating. You still can for sure gain weight, especially if you're like piling on, if you're like me and trying to gain weight. And you're just piling on the or just oils, like spoonfuls of coconut oil or olive oil. If you do it in liquid form, same as any other weight gain or protein shake, your body doesn't interpret liquids the same way. The chewing physically sends a satiation response. So if you cheat and get them as liquids, then you kind of bypass all your satiation responses a little bit.
And that's another good thing that I would, anytime a new client is coming to me, I'd also look at blood sugar. And specifically, the first thing we would do is start finding ways to add more protein. First time, definitely the first thing I look at is how can we get some more protein into here? And then, so my preference, my coaching style is to add before I subtract. Because people are like, oh, I don't want to give up my whatever, my coffee, my wine, my chocolate, my ice cream. But fine, don't. But you have to do this first. So like before you have, hopefully no one is eating donuts on a regular basis, but if you are, you have to have a protein shake first. And then if you still want the donut, you have the donut. And then eventually you'll get to the point where it's like, you know what, I'm actually kind of like, I don't really want it. Protein is so stabilizing for the blood sugar, for the mood, it's so efficient as far as the different ways that you can get energy out of it, right? Because it's gluconeogenic. And definitely protein, fiber, and water, my top three.
I think though that bridges all dietary wars: vegan, vegetarian, carnivore, keto, all of those. The one thing, except some really militant vegans where I'm like, you guys don't look good, protein is usually the low-hanging fruit where you're like, doesn't matter what your belief structure is around it, eat more protein first. Whatever protein you resonate with. It's hard to get the amount on a plant-based diet like vegan that you need to thrive. You usually have to go to powders, because I was vegan for a while, and you just end up pounding powders all the time because there's just nothing that's like 50 grams of protein naturally that you're going to eat that's plant-based. And whereas that's a single meal otherwise. But protein is key for regulating everything. I'm glad you touched on that. Before I forget, Have you noticed specifically with blood sugar imbalances and hormones for your clients or just for yourself? Like, how much of that did you play with?
Blood sugar. It's it's essential because it can make mood swings worse.
Right.
It can make cramps worse. It can make it just, and then if you're primarily burning sugar, right, you're not giving your body the ingredients to make healthy hormones in the
Right.
first place. So if you're primarily a sugar burner, hormones are made out of fat for the
Yeah.
most part, fat and
Cholesterol. Yeah.
protein.
Right.
Yeah. So if you are not eating enough fat, or you're not able to tap into your body's natural fat stores, you don't even have what you need in order to make the hormones if you wanted to have balanced hormones, right? And then blood sugar stabilization, if we're looking at, if someone's coming to me and they are overweight, and whether or not they're trying to lose weight, if
Mhm.
I'm looking at them and I'm saying, okay, you're probably 10, 20, 30 pounds overweight, um bringing that blood sugar into stabilization is going to make a huge difference just on the energy levels and like the confidence levels,
Yes.
really. So when you feel like you're more in control of your energy levels, of your moods, of being out of like these crazy cravings that women tend to get at certain points in the hormonal cycle, when you feel like you are equipped with the tools to deal with that, it's really a confidence game, because
Yeah.
then you're like, wait, I am in control of this. I have 10 things I can do before I resort to the Ben and Jerry's, and then as weight starts to come off, as the metabolism gets more flexible, as you get into fat burning mode, um it's like you said, it's two sides of the same coin. They all talk to each other.
Yeah.
So it's huge. And it can also be a little overwhelming, because it's like, oh well, we can do blood sugar, we can do supplements, we
Right.
can do protein, we can do fitness, we can do bioidenticals. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's kind of the benefit of working with someone like us, working with a coach, is like, start with one.
Right.
I think this is the most important thing that you could be doing. Let's lock it in for a week. Text me once you've done it, and having that
Accountability is
accountability.
key. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You touched
And
on uh, the theory that your body knows what nutrients are in food. It's not really a theory. Your body knows what nutrients are in food. So whenever you're eating it, all those pleasure sensors and the cravings are usually associated with lack of a micronutrient. But because our food is so nutritionally devoid, or mainstream food, those
mm-hmm.
cravings don't mean that anymore. But I'm curious, do you think that holds with the stereotypical cravings that, I mean, I have them, but women definitely have them to a certain degree, like chocolate? Do you think it's going after like magnesium or something like that? Or do you think it is just flavor and other things?
Yes. So cravings can, like you said, cravings can either be psychological
Yeah.
or actually somatic, right?
Right.
Where it's like it's definitely needing a nutrient there. And it's both, it's definitely both. But I do think, yeah, that it's a nutrient that we're after. It's the magnesium in that case. Sometimes it's salt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there is gosh, it's escaping me right now, but there is a specific nutrient, and I would have to look it up, but there's a specific nutrient that is like the one thing that we're after when it comes to chocolate cravings, because
Interesting.
I'm not a chocolate person. I will take
Okay.
vanilla or strawberry like any day of the week, except except the day before I bleed. Like,
Right. Yeah. What
give it
is
to
that?
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was what
So
I was
yeah.
asking. It's like, I don't understand what your body is looking for in that changes with cycles or just different periods of, is it that you know you're going to lose something, so you are going after a specific nutrient? Like, I don't
Mm.
understand that at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's the comfort food aspect of it
Yeah,
too, which is the
that's true.
psychological side. Yeah.
But if it was like baker's chocolate, if it was very, very dark with almost no sweetness to it, would be the same thing.
Mm,
Because I do like 90%.
hmm. It
And I
depends
wonder
on the
if it's
person.
right. All these interesting factors. Thankfully, it doesn't matter because chocolate's amazing. But
Right.
yeah,
Cacao
always
is
curious.
amazing.
Cacao's
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and you guys had the richest cacao I've had probably this year
Mm,
at your last event of the season. That was thick, creamy, and rich. That was really good. For anyone
yeah.
listening, Asheville is a cacao central, or Western North Carolina, I should say, is a cacao central for just musical performances, a lot of heart-centered gatherings, and sort of just like mild medicine, um, just medicinal soul warming gatherings. Cacao is always the center. So there's cacao wars. Everyone sees who can have the best cacao. Yours was very good. So yeah,
Thank you.
I'll give you
Yeah.
that. Is
That came from
that mandala?
no, we actually haven't done one from Mandala. That came from Guatemala.
Oh yes. Okay.
Matthew Human brought us a bunch of bricks when he came out to play in July or August, I think it
Gotcha.
was. I want to say Soul Play Yoga,
Hmm.
Yoga Farm, something like that. I would
Well,
blanking
thank
on
you
the
to
name
the
again, but
Guatemalan farmers. That was
yeah,
delicious.
yeah.
Um,
Nick Morse makes it thick.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
seriously. So we've touched on a lot of things. What any big ones we've glossed over, or anything that you think is critical um, to send home?
Mm, just touching in again on being a detective and changing one
Yes.
variable at a time and working with someone who has a framework to guide you through. Because I really believe in self-guided healing. I believe that you are the healer, that your
Yep.
body intuitively knows where it wants to start, and you'll feel a guidance towards that. And when I'm coaching someone, I'm always bringing in my magic modalities. Like, let's consult the tarot, let's drop into meditation, let's bring this back into the body through somatic intuitive movement. Let's do all of these things. And yeah, just being really careful when you're working with concentrated,
Yep.
even natural medicines, right? When you're working
Right.
with anything in concentration and it's specifically a hormone regulator, if you are not yet familiar with understanding your biofeedback and charting it,
Yep.
like, just if you're not familiar with what to chart on any given day, I have a whole spreadsheet
Yeah.
that people go through where they fill in, here was how my sleep was, hunger, mood, energy,
Yep.
cravings, again, all of these things, right? And what were you eating at what time were you eating? All of these things matter. If
Yep.
you don't have that accountability and that reflection from someone who can look, from the outside and help you move through that, it can feel so overwhelming. And I think that in the time of the internet where information is a dime a dozen, right?
Yep.
Literally. You can get any information that you want, and you can have confirmation biases on any information that you want. Having someone who can guide you down one path. It's like, yes, okay, I see that information. Yes, we can loop that in at some point, but like, let's do one thing at a time. Let's make sure that we're paying attention. Let's
Hmm.
change those habits. Let's add on, and then we can subtract all of these things. I can't emphasize enough how important that is, especially if you and my program is 12 weeks long. Like, we go through three
Same.
moon cycles,
Yeah.
and we can make serious results from that. Like,
Oh
you
yeah.
have to have the patience to get through. Usually the first week is the hardest,
Yep.
right?
Do you have a
But
pantry purge or something like that your first week?
if it's really bad, if someone is very metabolically inflexible, i might
Hmm.
i might be like, all right,
Yeah.
show me what's in there.
Right.
um
First week is definitely the hardest. Yeah, a lot of
yeah.
mindset hurdles, a lot of just habitual things like just breaking what you usually grab for. The brain really doesn't like changing, not because
Mm-mm.
it's lazy, just because it costs energy, and it is really good at conserving energy. So it is difficult to even recognize those neural networks firing sometimes. Habit
Yeah,
change is definitely the crucial aspect of any transformative endeavor.
yeah, absolutely. And mindset is critical too.
Yeah.
Like, what is the vibration of the music that you're listening to? What is the vibration of the digital information you're taking in? Like, going on a social media diet if you need to.
Mm,
I don't like the word diet, but um just looking at, because really it's all energy,
yeah.
right? Like, food just happens to be a very, very dense
Right.
packet of energy. But
Right.
if you're looking at, anything
Right.
here, right? Anything on your phone that's just constantly coming into your your energy body, that can be really important. That can be really important too. Like allowing people to change their identity around, oh, I am a fat person, I have always been fat. I am a sick person, I have always been sick. I always will be sick. Going into the energetics is also really important that we
Mm-hmm.
haven't touched on it at all. And it's a
No, that could be
little,
an entirely separate podcast for sure.
yeah.
I mean, you're exactly correct. So you can be having the best day, having all of your food under control, you got a workout in, you're just running high, and then you read something, and that thought will just trigger a biochemical reaction. Joe Dispenza was instrumental in helping me explain to others how this works. It's just like thoughts and feelings aren't just thoughts and feelings, they are associated with biochemical reactions. You are physically, by whatever comes into your mind, making there is chemistry happening behind that. So even if you were on top of it the day, what you let into your mind is just as important as the information you put down your mouth. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's because it's all energy, and it all
Yes.
triggers all of these things, right? So,
Right.
and that's just something that comes up naturally with coaching. So one of the things that I've been deep diving into lately has been self-love.
Yeah.
It's like, hopefully you enter into a coaching arrangement because you are trying to better yourself, because you love yourself, not coming from a place of deficiency or a place of shame and judgment, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm not good enough, I should go get a fitness coach and they'll help me be good enough, right? That sense of worthiness, I'm worthy upon arrival, I am good enough, I am a divine human being, has to be a baseline. We can do anti-inflammatories all day,
Right.
but if you don't have that sense of trust in yourself, of radical self-acceptance and forgiveness. So I just did a whole master class that I called Somatic Self-Love, where we were looking at taking the concept and the mental idea of self-love out of being a mental concept and
Yep.
into the body and into the lived experience. And using the analogy of romantic relationships, like what makes a romantic relationship work? Do you have those same elements in the relationship with yourself? So again, trust,
Yeah.
um, acceptance, all of these things, right? And so we went through these different pillars and elements of what it takes to really, because people are like, self-love, self-love, you have to love yourself. And it's like, okay, but how?
Right.
Like, how? We're not really taught how to do that.
Yeah.
And you can't just be like, oh, I love myself, because your brain is like, no, you don't.
Right. Yeah. It's hard
Your
to fool
inner critic
yourself.
is like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Did
Yep.
you hear how you were just talking to yourself? You do not. And all of these things. So that's something else that I walk my clients through.
That's a
And
wonderful name, and that sounds like a awesome program. Is that
yeah,
available somewhere, or
it
is it
is
in person?
available.
Okay, we'll
Yep.
put all those in the show notes. That I'm going to look at that because like you said, I am my own worst critic. I'm getting better at it, but that is a deeply conditioned thing. So that takes a lot of work to come to radical self-acceptance, especially on days off. Like taking days off as an entrepreneur is the hardest thing, where you're just like, no, you're fine, just take a relaxed day. Like, not it's as hard a thing to untrain the work ethic that maybe was beat into us or me as a kid. Just that is its own program. Like, it
Mm.
takes months of constantly even realizing you're doing it to yourself to just stop that network from firing and then slowly reprogram it. So I might be looking at that real soon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there again, adding rather than focusing on subtracting, right? Because the people get stuck in this idea that they have to completely control every single thought, that you have to monitor the what 50,000 thoughts that you have every single day. And that's not true. It's more about, again, if you think about it in like a supplement type of analogy,
Mm-hmm.
where get that concentrated dose of that high vibration, ride that for the rest of your day, and it makes it so much easier to look down from your high level, right? Looking down on these deprecating thoughts that we
Yep.
have, and they immediately don't ring as true. When your vibration is higher, they immediately pop up as, oop, that's an old thought. Oh, that's not accurate anymore. That's a distortion. That doesn't belong in my field anymore.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times we can just raise vibration in other ways that aren't necessarily specifically focused on controlling the thoughts.
Yes.
It's very important, but if your brain doesn't believe them, then it's like you can do affirmations all you want, but if you don't have the feeling of actually what that
Right.
feels like in your body, then your brain is going to reject it as not true, and it's going to go back to being all inner criticky on you, right?
That's a great way to phrase that. That's very Zen. So yeah, you have to do, or just make it so it no longer realize that not everything you think is true. So that's kind of the change a lot of aspects of yourself, and you just won't latch onto it as easily. So it's just something that comes up, whereas before you would run with it and sort of ingrain it into part of your identity, and now it's just like, no, I don't think so. Like that doesn't, yeah, it doesn't resonate with you, and it's no longer congruous with your field. That was a perfect phrase.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't let that thought turn into a feeling thought,
Yeah.
if it doesn't turn into energy and motion and emotion, then we're a lot more capable of separating ourselves, right? You've got the observer and the mind, this super powerful tool that we've been blessed with, but has started to completely take over and become our identities, right? So we could do a whole other
Uh-huh. Well,
whole
we
other
might.
episode on
Yeah.
that.
Wonderfully
Yeah.
put. Where can people find you if they want to look at your programs, or just, I'm sure you are you on social media or website or any
Yeah.
of that?
Yeah, definitely. So skyfirerising.com is my currently under construction website, but I'll throw up an opt-in so that anyone can get
Okay.
on my email list. And then Instagram is mostly where I hang out at Rachael Aurora, with an extra A, Rachael, Aurora. And I have links to the Somatic Self-Love
Yes.
Masterclass in my bio.
I am most excited about those. I will have all of those below the show notes. And before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to say or send as a message or touch on?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
having
my
me. I'm so
pleasure.
glad we got to connect, and you hold really great space. I really enjoy your podcast and listening to all the folks. I'm glad that we met.
Thank you. Likewise.
Yeah, just I think my last little thing that I would say is be clear in your intentions
Mm.
and take 1% growth every day. Like
Mm.
celebrate the little things, right? Start to look at your life as a celebration, and finding the small ways that you can really lift yourself up in that way. And um just not like forcing it so much. Be easy on yourself, be compassionate. Like, we're doing our best, we're in the middle of insane collective chaos,
Yep.
and it's not easy. So take it easy, rest, get that cortisol down.
Yes.
Make
Beautiful.
1% growth every day. And
Yeah. If
yeah,
if
you got
anyone takes
this.
anything away, those are perfect messages. Beautiful, beautiful closing messages. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much, Alex.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast, everyone. Thank you for listening all the way through. I learned a ton from Rachael, and I will put all of her herbal stacks, all of her contact information, social media information, courses that she has available below. Reach out, contact, and we will definitely be chatting again. We didn't go into much of the felt or energetic side of coaching, of impact and transformation. And our next podcast, I'm sure, will delve much more into that. Thanks for listening.